Hello, 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 hello. I am back once again doing more recording long form political narration. Um, it is a snippet from a book, I'll say that. But yeah, I'm back for more. I'm back for more. Back for more, back for more. And let's get this show on the road. Let's get this show on the road. As John D. Marks described the program, the CIA built up its own elaborate brainwashing program, which, like the Chinese and Soviet versions, took its own special twist from our national character. It was a tiny replica of the Manhattan Project, grounded in the conviction that the keys to brainwashing lay in technology. The program involved a number of infamous episodes, such as Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA set up a brothel and lured men with prostitutes to a location where they could be dosed with LSD and studied. The program also involved the agency studying the art of harassing individuals in order to induce a psychological breakdown. John D. Marks quotes one agency veteran describing how disgusted he was with the cruelty dished out to individuals in the hopes of learning how to manipulate their behavior. That's why I couldn't even take reading the files after a while. I was sickened at seeing people take pleasure in other people's inadequacies. First of all, it was dumb. For all the money that went out, nothing ever came back. First, you check to see if you could destroy a man's marriage. If you could, that would be enough to put a lot of stress on an individual, break him down. Then you might start a minor rumor campaign against him, harass him constantly, bump his car in traffic. A lot of it is ridiculous, but it may have a cumulative effect. Marx quotes agency insiders telling how they would capture a few teenage members of a street gang, spend some time attempting to brainwash them, and then send them to rejoin their comrades and weaken the group from within. With gang warfare, says an MK Ultra source, you try to get some defectors in place who would like to modify some of the group behavior and cool it. Now, getting a juvenile delinquent defective was motivationally not. Now, getting a juvenile delinquent defective was motivationally not all that different from getting a Soviet one. At the same time that the US CIA was engaged in its mind control research, MI6 was utilizing British psychiatrist William Sargent across the pond. His ruthless sleep room experiments were revealed decades later to have resulted in at least a few deaths, as he kept people asleep for months at a time, drugged as he tried to influence their minds in their sleep. William Sargent published a book called The Mind Possessed in 1973, describing what much of his research had discovered about mind control, suggestibility, and its somewhat contradictory William Sargent published a book called The Mind Possessed in 1973, describing what much of his research had discovered about mind control, suggestibility, and its somewhat contradictory nature. Sargent wrote, "It is not the mentally ill but normal people who are the most susceptible to brainwashing, conversion, possession, the crisis, or whatever you wish to call it, and who in their hundreds of thousands or millions fall readily under the spell of the demagogue or revivalist, the witch doctor, the pop group, the priest or the psychiatrist, or even to a lesser degree, the propagandist or advertiser. At the root of this all too common human experience is a state of heightened suggestibility, of openness to suggestion and exhortations." He went on to write in the book's conclusion, "Suggestibility is, in fact, one essential He went on to write in the book's conclusion, "Suggestibility is in fact one essential characteristic of being normal. A normal person is responsive to other people around him, cares about what they think of him, and is readily open to their suggestion and influence. If the great majority of people were not normally suggestible, we could not live together in society at all. We could not collaborate in any undertaking. The originators of new ideas and the founders of new systems are rarely themselves normal. The originators of new ideas and the founders of new systems are rarely themselves normal people. If they were, they would drop their new notions comparatively quickly in the face of the hostility of their fellows. The schizophrenic and the schizoid thinker is the most immune of all to outside influences dominating his ideas. His ideas come most often from inside himself and may be the product of hallucinations, delusions, and other abnormal thought processes which he experiences and which he tries to explain on the basis of further delusional thinking. During the war, schizophrenics were rarely upset by bombing, for instance, being far too preoccupied with their own inner turmoils and worries. Sargan did conclude that if you wanted someone to have a dramatic political or religious conversion, it was necessary to put them under stress. Persons of hysterical temperament are also highly suggestible. Hysterical behavior is most commonly the result of normal people breaking down under severe stresses, as was seen again and again during the war. Faith healing and spirit possession rarely happen in a calm, rational atmosphere, as every witch doctor and faith healer knows all too well. Emotions must be aroused for success to be obtained. Beyond these observations on suggestibility, the CIA had roughly the same lack of real discoveries in its mind control research as MI6 did with Sargent, though John D. Marks quotes agency veterans describe his results that clearly required some rather horrific methods. He wrote, "By the time MKUltra ended in 1963, agency researchers had found no foolproof way to brainwash another person. All experiments beyond a certain point always failed," says the MKUltra veteran, because the subject jerked himself back for some reason, or the subject got amnesiac or catatonic. Agency officials found through work like Cameron's that they could create vegetables, but such people served no operational purpose. People could be tortured into saying anything, but no science could guarantee they would tell the truth. How many people were turned into vegetables by CIA operatives trying to discover the secrets of mind control? How many were tortured? The bulk of the program's records were destroyed before MKUltra became public in the late 1970s, so we will never know. Lassitude as a mechanism of control. It is widely understood that CIA research spread LSD onto college campuses during the 1960s, contributing to the rise of drug culture, and this is largely undisputed. The CIA was paying college students and prisoners to take LSD in order to study its effects. Some intellectuals seem to have enjoyed the experience, decided to keep using it, and even recruited their friends. The CIA was thoroughly disappointed in its hope that LSD could be used as a mind control drug. However, as John D. Marks quotes intelligence officials noting in Search for the Manchurian Candidate, the drug had another effect that proved very useful. This CIA veteran describes all the colors of the rainbow growing out of the cracks in the sidewalk. He had always disliked the cracks as a sign of imperfection, But suddenly, the crack became natural stress lines that measured the vibrations of the universe. The CIA official states, "You tend to have a more global view of things. I found it awfully hard, when stoned, to maintain the notion, I am a U.S. citizen, my country, right or wrong. You tend to have these good higher feelings. You are more open to the brotherhood of man idea, and you are more susceptible to the seamy sides of your own society." I think that's exactly what happened during the 1960s, but it didn't make people more communist. It just made them less inclined to identify with the U.S. They took a plague on your both houses position. The new left of the 1960s was the perfect shield. The new left of the 1960s was the perfect shield against the emergence of any mass communist movement and the perfect vehicle for deconstructing those that existed around the world. What was achieved on a society-wide scale in Northern Ireland, Italy, and Jamaica could also be achieved within the individual human mind. To prevent a light switch effect, to avoid a David versus Goliath scenario, as Kitson and Lynn describe on the battlefield, could be done intellectually and to prevent a light switch effect, to avoid a David versus Goliath scenario, as Kitson and Lynn describe on the battlefield, could be done intellectually and psychologically with potential dissidents. The secret to defeating communism wasn't inducing massive fanatical anti-communism. Instead, it was inducing a kind of weary, unenthusiastic, plague on both your houses position and getting potential dissident fanatics into a dull state of indifference with a shades of gray perspective. The idea of avoiding direct confrontation to get what you want out of people is widely understood among sales and marketing researchers, as well as those who study the art of workplace management. The widely read 1937 self-help book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, written by Dale Carnegie, contains this anecdote about how a manager convinced his employees to wear their hard hats. George B. Johnston of Enid, Oklahoma, is the safety coordinator for George B. Johnston of Enid, Oklahoma, is the safety coordinator for an engineering company. One of his responsibilities is to ensure that employees wear their hard hats whenever they are on the job in the field. He reported that whenever he came across workers who were not wearing hard hats, he would tell them with a lot of authority about the regulation and that they must comply. As a result, he would get sullen acceptance, and often, after he left, the workers would remove their hats. As a result, he would get sullen acceptance, and often, after he left, the workers would remove the hats. He decided to try a different approach. The next time he found some of the workers not wearing their hard hats, he asked if the hats were uncomfortable or did not fit properly. Then he reminded the men in a pleasant tone of voice that the hat was designed to protect them from injury and suggested that it always be worn on the job. The result was increased compliance with the regulation, with no resentment or emotional upset. You will find examples of the futility of criticism bristling on 1,000 pages of history. But what the CIA discovered about LSD and how it reduced its own officers to feel neutrality toward the American government and no longer be annoyed by cracks in the sidewalk points to something of a far. But what the CIA discovered about LSD and how it reduced its own officers to feel neutrality toward the American government and no longer be annoyed by cracks in the sidewalk points to something of far higher caliber. It also explains a huge amount about U.S. art, culture, and academic discourse, particularly in regards to notions that are considered left. The main way anti-establishment sentiments are contained among the U.S. population, the main intellectual counterinsurgency technique used today seems to be inducing lassitude. What is lassitude? Merriam-Webster defines it in two ways. First, a condition of weariness or debility, and second, a condition characterized by lack of interest, energy, or spirit. Right here, we find the key to maintaining control, and we see the aim of the power structure when it perceives rising discontent. The goal is not to induce compliance through absolute terror of punishment and repression. In the long term, that will result in resentment. The goal is not to change our minds and convince us that the society we live in is acceptable. This is hardly possible, even under ideal conditions, as people always have something to be dissatisfied with. And especially as conditions worsen across the United States, it's a completely unrealistic goal. The power structure of the United States and the globalist imperialist system has devised a number of ways to induce lassitude, to make us passionless, without energy, without spirit, weary, debilitated, and thus not an obstacle in carrying out their transition to a low-wage police state and moves toward war. The Congress for Cultural Freedom program of the CIA brought forth various thinkers who fixated on the notion of fascism. Rather than using the economic definition pioneered by R. Palm Dutt and other communists during the Great Depression, that fascism was heavy-handed state control used to impose degrowth to stabilize the economy amid a crisis of overproduction, the Frankfurt School cultural Marxists defined fascism differently. Susan Sontag's New York Review of Books essay Fascinating Fascism insisted that German filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl's photo exhibit of African tribes was fascist because it contained certain themes. Sontag wrote, fascism also stands for an ideal, or rather ideals, that are persistent today under other banners. The ideal of life as art, the cult of beauty, the fetishism of courage, the dissolution of alienation in the aesthetic feelings of community, the family of man. Although the Nuba are black, not Aryan, Riefenstahl's portrait of them evokes some of the larger themes of Nazi ideology. The contact between the clean and the impure, the incorruptible and the defiled, the physical and the mental, the joyful and the critical. Sontag went on to explain what she thought the fascist aesthetic was: extravagant effort and the endurance of pain, the massive groups of people, the turning of people into things, the multiplication and replication of things and grouping of people, things, around an all-powerful hypnotic leader figure or force. The fascist dramaturgy centers on the organization. Gotta double check that in pronunciation. If I think I have it on this, I'm pretty sure I either have it here or it might be on. Be right back. Be right back. So it is on my. I had it here. Let's see. So it's definitely on here. Orgiastic. Knew I had it. Knew I had it. All right. Back. The fascist dramaturg. The fascist dramaturgy centers on the orgiastic transactions. The fascist dramaturgy centers on the orgiastic transactions between mighty forces and their puppets, uniformly garbed and shown in swelling numbers. Its choreography alternates between ceaseless motions and a congealed, static, virile posing. Fascist art glorifies surrender. It exalts mindlessness. It glamorizes death. Mass athletic demonstration. A choreo- Fascist art glorifies surrender. It exalts mindlessness. It glamorizes death. Mass athletic demonstration. A choreographed display. A choreographed display of bodies is a valued activity in all totalitarian countries, and the art of the gymnast, so popular now in Eastern Europe, also invokes and the art of the gymnast, so popular now in Eastern Europe, also evokes recurrent features of fascist aesthetics, the holding in or confining of force, military precision in both fascist and communist politics. The will is staged publicly in the drama of the leader and chorus. According to Sontag, a mass movement of any kind in which people are pulling together to work for a cause and feeding off each other's energy, encouraging each. According to Sontag, a mass movement of any kind in which According to Sontag, a mass movement of any kind in which people are pulling together to work for a cause and feeding off each other's energy, encouraging each other to be stronger and moving in coordination is inherently fascist. The optimistic energy it gives off, we must assume, is also fascist. Hannah Arendt echoes these sentiments in her own writing on totalitarianism. Her piece, Eichmann in Jerusalem, focuses on how the Nazi war criminal was an ordinary man who had been part of the YMCA before joining the Hitler Youth. The message is, on the surface, about nonconformity. However, when you dig a little deeper, the message is much darker. The evils of the Nazi regime and the Holocaust are not rooted in the breakdown of capitalism, but rather in the inherent barbaric and cruel nature of human beings. The piece is intended to warn against the danger of any kind of mass movement in which the inherently cruel and evil rabble, with their banality of evil, can be unleashed. Theodore Adorno's The Authoritarian Personality comes to similar conclusions, arguing that the rise of Hitler was rooted in certain flaws in the human spirit, namely, the tendency of people to believe that right and wrong exist, light switch effect, David versus Goliath, and their ability to join some kind of mass movement and subordinate themselves to it in order to advance a cause they believe is right. The underlying message of all the New Left intellectuals promoted by the CIA, with their work published in Partisan Review, Paris Review, Der Monat, and Encounter, magazines subsidized by the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom program, is that passion, mass movements, and belief in truth are very dangerous. From the perspective of the CIA-funded New Left, the ideal state of being is lassitude. If one becomes a partisan believer, a passionate activist for a cause, you are either a sucker and fool, or worse, a brown shirt Eichmann in the making. Postmodernism, the philosophical perspective of the New Left, rejects the notion that grand narratives of human society exist and derided all such ideologies and systems of thought as totalitarian. Instead, it celebrates deconstruction, i.e., taking apart such movements and deflating the passion and fanaticism that come with them, inducing lassitude. Luigi Mangione, the new abstract painter. At the same time the CIA was funding these intellectuals, it was also funding abstract art. The CIA intentionally worked to counter social realism with abstract expressionism. The CIA funded the work of Jackson Pollock, famous for splattering paint on a canvas. Michael Newberry, who has taught at Otis College of Art and Design, writes, "The CIA and CCF used museums, philanthropists, foundations, magazines, both popular and literary, artists, musicians, critics, and intellectuals for their propaganda. Their stated aim was to win the cultural Cold War against the USSR. Anything that was anti-communist was unimpeachable. Their idea was to promote new American art, literature, and music with the slant that it represented freedom. This art, specifically abstract art, broke fundamentally with European and Russian art. The CIA's intellectuals might not have known that they were subverting humanity by rejecting the cultural values of Western civilization. There are films of Pollock splashing and dripping paint without any hesitation on a canvas laid flat on the ground. I remember watching one of these films as an 8 or 9-year-old child in elementary school, an indoctrination that still makes me sick. These films were made to give the impression of a passionate genius at work by dignifying a pissing-like gesture without thought, perception, or heart. Some have equated this to vomiting. But don't laugh or dismiss this statement, as there are contemporary postmodern artists who swallowed color liquid and then literally vomited on canvases, consequently bypassing all aesthetic knowledge, emotion, and perception. The CIA psyop behind promoting Pollock was to send the message that genius is a blustering, nihilistic, crazed artist who is compelled to do senseless acts. They succeeded in confusing the hell out of the general public by undermining their sense that art should be knowable and inspiring. The CIA knew and was threatened by the knowledge that real art was the linchpin that empowers humans to feel the full power of their combined senses, thoughts, and emotions. Their evil psyop was to convince people that passion without reason or reality is genius. The bigger the farce, the more they can get away with. Through using abstract art, the CIA hold on, I got people stopping. All right. Mine needs to stop and literally like mad. And my microphone can actually pick that up. The bigger the farce, the more they can get away with. Through using abstract art, the CIA would drive a psychological. Through using abstract art, the CIA would drive a psychological wedge through the soul of not only Americans, but humanity as well. A Harvard-educated art blogger named Nancy Hills gives us a defense of Jackson Pollock and similar abstract art, which she admits is ugly. She writes, "I believe ugly paintings threaten us because they're unfamiliar, unruly, and emerge unbidden without our consent. They subvert our need for control. It's like experiencing a mutation causing unforeseeable consequences. They're unpredictable, unfamiliar, unrecognizable, and different than our recent work. In essence, Nancy Hills and Michael Newberry agree. Abstract art makes us feel scattered, lost, not in control, defeated, and unable to change the world around us. Abstract art puts us in a negative, defeated place of feeling disempowered. While at first we may panic if such an emotional state is induced or feel angrily insulted, after a while we accept it. The long-term result of feeling unbidden without our consent, experiencing a mutation, and having our need for control subverted for an extended period is feeling a bit. The long-term result of feeling unbidden without our consent, experiencing a mutation, and having our need for control subverted for an extended period is a feeling of being psychologically defeated and bitterly accepting it. Lassitude. Rather than presenting the world as one full of contradictions and challenges, with an energizing battle between right and wrong taking place before us in which we can choose to be active participants, abstract art leads us to see the world as a mass of randomness and disappointment, inconsistency in which we are more or less powerless. This, of course, matches the postmodernist philosophy. This, of course, matches the postmodernist philosophy. It kind of is. Back to the recording. This, of course, matches the postmodernist philosophy and its understanding of the universe, which was labeled by George Lukács as philosophical irrationalism. Michael Newberry's reflection on the films he was shown of Jackson Pollock speaks volumes. These films were made to give the impression of a passionate genius at work by identifying a pissing-like gesture without thought, perception, or heart. The defeated mindset created by abstract art celebrates irrational emotional behavior, lashing out with no clear aim or goal as genius. Yes, in the minds of those with no conception of a real mass movement and no belief that we could create a society where healthcare is available to all, the idea of Luigi Mangione killing a billionaire CEO, inscribing political messages on the bullets, and composing a manifesto about vengeance and resentment, giving voice to the lingering anger and disappointments found throughout society, must indeed seem like an amazing art project. The media is all too happy to give non-stop coverage to this pessimistic Joker movie that appears to be playing out in real life. Giving publicity to Mangione, presented as the pretty-faced, tragic hunger artist who displays the widespread negative emotions with an act of ugly, cathartic violence with no stated demand or goals, is very safe. It boosts the negative. Yep. 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 It boosts all the negative emotions, the bitterness, the feelings of being defeated, the desire to cathartically lash out with the lack of real goals, all the ugly components of an ugly painting, all necessary to induce a psychological state of lassitude among dissidents in the long term. Conditions are getting worse. We all feel bad. We all feel like punching somebody or maybe even shooting somebody. Mangione did it, so we can celebrate him for making our bitter complaints heard without building any movements for change or even putting forward any demands, or even teaching us anything about the healthcare system or the unfolding crisis that we did not already know. We have a new anti-hero in the cable news cycle. We can give a bitter grin and say, somebody killed one of the bastards. good for them. We can then go back to observing the negativity all around us, feeling completely powerless, and resuming our usual state of lassitude. Because it is getting very hot in here, I'm going to take a break. I might pick this up tonight, but I need to take a break because I was recording beforehand. No, it's gonna get to a point where it's about not necessarily about killing people is cool and hip, but it's about getting to the point where how this is supposed to induce lassitude instead of a mass movement for real change per se, and how the CIA in particular wants to induce lassitude, and it's been their goal for decades. But yeah, I gotta take a break. So stay cool and see you later on.